Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Crazy Libertarian. If you're on Facebook, happy New Year's Eve. Be safe tonight. If you're going to be drinking, make sure you're not driving. And if you're going to be driving, make sure you're not drinking. A little bit of harm reduction advice. If you're going to be doing things other than alcohol, make sure that you get a test kit so that you don't die. Happy New Year's, everyone. If you're listening the morning after at 8 a.m. for whatever reason. First off, I'm sorry that you have to be up at such an insanely hour on such a sacred day. But thank you to you as well, and everyone else that's probably going to be listening in whenever they decide to cut me in throughout the week, because, New Year's Eve, the week is always crazy. I like you all. Thank you so much for listening. We've got some great stuff to talk about today. We've got something to talk about that I've, way before I ever had this show, and I will do it on. Sorry, this is a non-exclusive to 88.1 FM, which, by the way, is the name of the station you're listening to, 88.1 FM, KPPP. That is K triple P, and that call-in LP, that call-in number is 701-566-0917, 701-566-0917. But then I'll talk about it on any chance I get to, because this is something that I talk a lot about numbers on this show, as I should, right? Because some of these numbers are just mind-bogglingly, 22 veterans a day are killing themselves, a large amount that are probably under the age of 21, yet they can't even buy a cigarette anymore. We have over half of the people that are in jail in this state are in jail over low-level marijuana possession. We've wasted thousands of, or hundreds of thousands of lives on the war on drugs. We're spending trillions. Our education costs have gone astronomically high. Blah, blah, blah. I talk a lot about numbers. But for the most part, today I don't want to talk about numbers. I want to talk about a story, something that's very personal because of a couple of experiences I've had that really, it just does such a better story and such a better job of illustrating what's wrong with this sick system that we have the balls to call a criminal justice system than anything else. So I want to talk about the Silk Road. Mr. Ross Ulbricht, the founder of the Silk Road, for making a website, nonviolent offense. He never bought or sold drugs on there. The Silk Road, for those of you that don't know, is pretty much think of it like a really, really, really libertarian eBay where you could buy or sell anything. The only rules on there was that you couldn't do anything like human trafficking. Pretty much, it applied the non-aggression principle, which, if you don't know because you have friends or a life, is the bedrock of libertarian thought, that anything is moral unless you're aggressing on another. So therefore, drugs and consensual services and guns and also a ton of legal things that people just decided they wanted to buy and sell via Bitcoin because, hey, why the hell not? We live in a free country, right? We're bought and sold. And so it's a very, very, very long story, but, I'm trying to keep it interesting for you folks, so I'll skip some of the details here. But the gist of the matter is they arrested him, and then a whole bunch of other crazier stuff happened after that. To be clear, before this, he had never committed a crime. He was one of the users of a I think it was a Dread Pirate to Robert account was the name of the admin on the Silk Road website, which they allegedly tied to him. Anyhow, so after a whole boondoggle of things, they end up giving him 2 life sentences plus 40 years for a nonviolent first-time offense of running a website. Despite the fact that the biggest meth dealer on this website got, I believe, 5 or 10 years. All the drug dealers got less than a decade. Even the horrible ones. The founder of Silk Road 2 got 2 years. Ross will be spending unless he gets out on a pardon, will be spending the rest of his life in jail over a nonviolent website charge. This doesn't even bring up the fact that he was actually sentenced for things that he wasn't charged with. Which, by the way, if you've taken History 101 or Civics 101 in the 7th grade, is not how the hell the criminal justice system is supposed to work. They accused him of hiring a hitman to kill this other actor, and which, by the way, based on the research I've done, doesn't seem like something that Ross would do. But they didn't convict him on it, yet they threw it in the sentencing, which is kind of not at all how that's supposed to work. But then, even to go further in the detail, numerous that worked on this case ended up going to jail and facing charges themselves because of the highly unethical, highly questionable behavior that they participated in. So another commentator, I forget the name, said that Ross was something like oh, what was the word? Like a nerdy Boy Scout who effectively got 2 life sentences plus 40 years in prison. And think about this, right? First time offender, non-violent, uh, non-violent crime. Not to mention that, like, this is someone that we actually kind of want out in the community. He ran a very successful, enterprising business on the internet. That's something that our country needs in the current international system, right? And by the way, this dude, despite getting hosed, despite there was and a lot more than I could probably do a 3 hour special. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll call up Ross's mom, have her Skype in, do a 2 hour special on it because it's so ridiculously heinous. I just wanted to bring it up as a launching point. But there were so many irregularities in the case, and there was so much. I'm going to call it what it was. It was a screw job. It was very evident that not the government at every level, including the judge who was presiding, the prosecutors, they wanted to make an example of him. And so Ross isn't in jail or prison, excuse me, because of anything to do with the Silk Road or because of any crimes that he committed. He's in prison to keep people like me and you, I guess for lack of a better term, in line. Because you better not think for a second that you can go out and allow people to engage in commerce that doesn't hurt anyone. You better not think that for a second, because they will throw the book at you. And what do we call that when you get attacked and prosecuted not based on what you did, but because of the ideas that you were espousing? We call that being a political prisoner, which is something that I was under the impression the side that won the Cold War didn't do. But yet Ross Ulbricht, a young man who is, I believe, 28 or 29, upper ranges of the 20s, I believe, is still sitting in prison, still rotting away, for no good reason. Not to mention he's been a perfect prisoner. He's taught people how to code. He's taught people how to get their GEDs and other various things. He's taught people how to play instruments. He's been like nothing but an awesome guy. He said that he'll never break another law as long as he lives. He's made it very clear that he's sorry for what he did. He's made it very clear that if he ever gets out, he just wants to kind of, you know, and it's really sad. I really recommend that if you have a Facebook or whatever, you go on there and you look up Free Ross on Facebook or go to freeross.org and get directed to the petition to tell President Donald Trump to pardon him because, as I'll get into later, Donald Trump is actually the most criminal justice reform-friendly president of my lifetime, which is a wonky thing to say about that particular guy, but nonetheless. So we have a guy who's a threat to nobody, whose only offense was running a website, not dictate, and mind you, keeping the really horrendous stuff off, keeping things that like people should be in jail for off of the website. He's gotten substantially more time than literally everyone else involved. And once again, not a threat. Never was a threat. Got everything on earth thrown at him wrong. His case actually made it all the way up to the Supreme Court, but they decided not to take it, so it made it through several layers of appeals. What it all kind of boils down to is that the government will take this nerdy Boy Scout who designed a website and they will take him, throw him in jail for 2 life sentences plus 40 years based on crimes that they didn't even convict him of. And they won't even be that shy that they're doing it, A, not by the book, B, being very open about just kind of getting this kid, and C, doing it. And this one might be a little between the lines, yeah, but is a message not about anything to do with drugs or taxes or the internet, but I believe it's a question of control. And they sent that message very powerfully. So the question I have is if we can take an honor Boy Scout student who designed a website, nonviolent, blah, 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 all this other stuff. He made a mistake. Yeah, he made a horrible mistake. Did he make a mistake that should get him in life should get him put in prison for the rest of his life and then another life and then 40 years for Christ's sake? I think it's pretty obvious that he didn't. He didn't murder a room full of people. He didn't, I don't know, commit war crimes in the Middle East. He didn't do anything like this, right? All over a website. What are they going to get you for next? What are they going to get other people for next? And I kind of want to parlay this into, there's a lot of the government, although we like to say we have like equality under law and justice for all and all that good stuff, we all know that A, money talks, and that B, a lot of people are breaking a lot of laws. There was one study a few years ago that said something like you're probably committing 3 small low-level felonies a day. Imagine if one day someone, I don't know, happens to commit one of those weird, let's say it's some like copyright infringement, whatever, low-level felony. What if the FBI doesn't like what they're saying? They can prove that they have the felony. They have all the documents to prove that they did it. They have the statute. They draw it up, and then they go just drop it on pretty much whoever they feel like for no good reason. That's very much a possibility in the America that we live in. And so I really just kind of want to focus on how easy it is to get ensnarled in this sickening criminal justice system. And then furthermore, like, in addition to how sick and messed up the system is, I want to show that, like, despite this, neither side really gets it. And I want to... There's some stuff that I need to call out to those of you that will listen to me. It'll be a long time before the people that are actually doing it will, because they probably don't like what I have to say. But think about this. We've already admitted that the federal government, or the government in general, if they don't like you, what you have to say, they will go out on questionable grounds, and they will ruin your life and the life of your families over nonsense that they haven't even, over crimes that they haven't even charged you with, right? Well, let's juxtapose that against the fact that they'd recently lowered the cigarette smoking and buying and anything tobacco-related age to 18, meaning that there are millions of Americans. The FDA said that it was effectively, what was it, December 20th was the age to be 21? That millions of Americans, and listen, I don't smoke, I've vaped on air a couple times, but that was mostly for the image of it. Whatever. Not my vice, right? But millions of people have just turned into criminals. And how many millions of people might be unaware that the law has changed or might be used to selling to people? And how many black markets did they open up where people that formerly were able to at least go buy cigarettes for, I don't know, $10 a pack will now be buying it for $15 or $20 a pack in sketchy back deal alleys? How many people will be caught up in the criminal justice system? How many lives will be ruined over a prohibition that's not going to work? Like, we already know it doesn't work. I mean, I say this as a 23-year-old, but based on some experiences when I was 21, or when I was under 21, I can tell you that you're not really preventing people from getting access per se, as much as making them much riskier with that access when they do get it, at least as it pertains to alcohol, which clearly our federal government, in its great and all-knowing knowledge, thinks that current situation is great. So let's think about this. We've got millions of more people, potentially like tens of millions of people, could become criminals and caught up in this over arbitrary nonsense from Washington, D.C., right? So let's take this a little bit of a step further. So in this country, at the age of 18, you can't smoke a cigarette, can't have a beer. Hell, you can't even rent a car in a lot of places, right? But you know what you can do? You apparently have enough life experience or what have you that you can vote on other laws, but you can't. So you can vote on telling other people what to do, but not to tell yourself what to do. You can sign up for the military. You can go, like the troops are currently having to deal with in Baghdad in the middle of a riot in an embassy, sign up to die in a war that was based on lies at the age of 18. Hell, you can do that at 17. They recruit in high schools. They're proud about recruiting in high schools, colleges. They'll pay your bills, whatever. So you can go die in a war of imperialism that was started by a bunch of, you'll have to bleep this part out, bastards 20 years ago, and is being continued largely by a series of bastards. Or, and be clear, that's the people orchestrating the war. Or you can take out a lifetime of student loan debt. You can take out 6 figures if you want to get an English degree from a private university where you have to pay $60,000 a year. That's $30,000 a semester times 2, not including room and board, and blah, 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 blah. But you can't have smoke? It seems a little bit weird to me. Because here's the thing. especially if we're going to be locking people up over this nonsense, right? And you know they will. They'll get their money. The government always gets their money. They always get it from you and me. That should be obvious by this point. They're always going to get paid. So they're always going to enforce these laws. So, like, as long as we're going to be ruining lives over it, can we just maybe, I don't know, it does kind of seem like if you're not able to sign up for a lifetime of addiction and cancer, then maybe you shouldn't be able to sign up for the financial equivalency of that. Or maybe, maybe if you can't decide to get yourself drunk and do what you want to do on a Friday night, maybe you shouldn't be allowed to do 3 tours in Afghanistan back to back to back. Because let's be honest, if either we're adults and we have a certain amount of rights and responsibilities and liberties, or we're not. I thought that was kind of sort of clear. Now, what I've made evident over this is that every time that the government, or what I've tried to, is that every time that the government infringes upon one of those liberties, it gets worse and worse and worse, and their powers grow. And really, what's the point of being a free adult if the average American is committing 3 felonies a day? We have over 1,500 pages of federal law, not including state laws and all that other stuff. Laws are so convoluted that no one really has any idea what the hell is legal anyhow over like basic things like drug laws, which is still often a confusing and convoluted issue, or things like, I don't know, hurting people and taking their stuff that's actually based on morality. It all kind of seems like a lot of it is left up to almost chance, right? Like it's a very confusing and complex and thick system. But if you trip it up, they won't hear that as an excuse and they'll be quick to take away your liberty. So I want to reflect on that. First off, we're agreeing that people that are ostensibly adults that can decide to have a drink or smoke a cigarette, ooh, how dangerous, that these people can't do a whole bunch of other things, and as a matter of fact, many of these things will get them thrown in a cage for a very long time, where they'll lose contact with their family, they'll lose their job, etc. Our interview that we get into later gets onto that. But at the very same time, we're saying that people much younger than that can not only be expected to go to jail for adult-sized terms if they violate these crimes, but yet there's still, once again, I just don't get how our federal government can, with a straight face, say that it's okay for 17-year-olds to sign up for the process of fighting overseas for their country, for coming back with increased likelihoods of suicide, 22 veterans a day, coming back to a system that doesn't work, coming back to all this nonsense. But they're not old enough to go have a beer with their dad down at the local bar. America, we need to have a discussion here, and we need to figure out what the hell does it mean to actually be a free adult? Because I'm confused. I thought that I would know by now. I'm 23. I don't know. I still have all those tags on my mattresses because I'm afraid of the SWAT team kicking down my door if I remove them. I don't know what the hell's going on. And I feel like a lot of people are in a very similar boat here. So there's a larger issue of autonomy, right? And why are we having these laws in the first place? Why are we doing some of these things? And that's kind of an open-ended question because a lot of this doesn't really make any sense. So if you think that you should maybe be able to make the decision to smoke a cigarette if you're able to smoke a member of Al-Qaeda overseas in Afghanistan, let's maybe have some more discussions about this, because it sure seems like we backed our way into this whole thing. It doesn't seem like this was done with much support or debate or anything like that. So, America, can you maybe stop talking about impeachment for 20 damn seconds so we can talk about the fact that kids that have to be taught about what 9/11 was are not old enough to buy a cigarette, but are old enough to go fight in the direct consequence of that war? That would be a really great start. You know what? Let's get 2020 vision and actually determine what the hell this criminal justice system is. Because, I don't know, I think we're about 8 or 9 episodes into this little series, and I'm more confused now than I was in the beginning. So, let's figure it out, America. This has been the Crazy Libertarian. Don't touch that dial. Don't stray from that page. We've got an awesome interview coming up. Over and out. Hey there, folks. Welcome back to the Crazy Libertarian. It is me, Bradley Foster. I have not gone away. And for this week's interview, I have someone a little more close to home for a lot of the issues that we talk about. I have with us Adam Martin, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and your organization.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Adam Martin, the founder and executive director for F5 Project. I believe, I've been asking myself that exact question, what F5 is, what it is today. Originally, when we started off, it was a criminal justice reform organization of just meeting people where they're at. There was a lot of talk of like what we should do with people in the criminal justice system. And I think F5 is really the hands and feet of people's thoughts of what we should do. That was 3 years ago. Today we have like 22, 24 employees across the state, 7 houses for reentry efforts, and a lot of efforts at legislation and peer support, and very big into recovery and just meeting people where they're at.
That's really awesome. So, there's obviously a lot that if you've been listening to this show, you know that we love covering stuff about criminal justice reform, and we're very big into that. But I kind of want to go back to the beginning when, that 3 years ago. What really, because this is obviously, how do you put it? It's definitely something that's unique for our part of the country, focusing on reentry over punitive projects, and it's still relatively new, right? So what did you see missing, I guess, that encouraged you and some other individuals to kind of take that first step?
Well, I think the big piece is that I had experienced it. Like I knew what it was like to be on probation, in the high technical recidivism results that we were getting, which was like 40% of the people on probation
40%?
were going back to prison.
Wow, that's worse than like slot machines.
Yeah, it was pretty high. We've seen it go down in the last 3 years with, the First Lady coming out and being in recovery, and then the Justice Reinvestment Act that happened in North Dakota, where they were spending more money, kind of up the river with people coming out of prison rather than waiting for them to potentially go back. And so there's been a lot of change. But my big reason was that I actually had experience in it. So I felt like, someone who had lived in the system and then now living outside of the system, not having to rely on the system, and having a good job and having my own place to live and my own vehicle, I felt like I had something that I could help inspire people in jail or prison before they got out.
That's really, really cool. Obviously, us at the Crazy Libertarian are really big fans of non-government entities taking over where government has expressly failed. So we commend you. If there's any mega rich donors in the Fargo-Moorhead area listening today, I'm sure that the F5 Project would appreciate it. Real quick, I assume that you guys have some social media, all that stuff. Where can people learn more about this awesome organization?
Yeah, so we're probably the most active on Facebook, and it's just F5 Project on Facebook. We got like 12,000 followers on there, which is pretty kind of a big deal in North Dakota.
That's 1.5%. Good job.
Yeah, it's so true. And then our website is f5project.org.
All right, f5project.org. We'll be sure to cut that out and get that out there for you.
Cool.
But I kind of want to talk about, so coming forward, in our community, what are some of the things that you've seen because there's been this weird, and I shouldn't call it weird like it's a bad thing, but it feels like in the last 3 years we've advanced like 30 in terms of how we deal with things in this state. We've had attempts at prison reform. We had people go to Norway to view all of that stuff. Yeah. Where do you think, in spite of everything that's been done, that we're still lacking the most? What do you think is still encouraging these relatively high recidivism rates? What do you think is kind of leading to this context and situations that lead people into these?
Yeah, so that there's a really, really complex answer to that, because I think there's a variety of reasons of why we're not seeing the results that we want to see. One could argue mid-level management, right? A lot of times when a leader like Leanne Birch comes out and is like, hey, we want to try something different, right, than what we've always done, it freaks a lot of people out, especially old timers or people who've been in the system for a while. I'm a big a theorist when it comes to, people who work in the system are just as traumatized as those who have to live in it, right?
Okay.
They become so used to the benefits and the paycheck and doing something the way that it's always been done that anything outside of that creates fear and it creates a threat
The
to their.
structure is seeking to maintain itself.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that once those people get flushed out, or we identify those people and they either say, hey, let's get on the reform path or get off the path, because now you're in the way. I think when that starts to build some momentum, which I've already seen, we're going to see a lot better results. That's one aspect. Another aspect, bail reform. I think using cash as a way to get people out of jail is completely destroyed our communities, where a person who, for a low-level drug felony, has to pay a $5,000 bail to just be able to keep their job and keep their housing and keep that. But they can't, so they sit in jail for 3 weeks, and then they lose all the same stuff that a guy would lose if he were to go to prison for long term, except they have to deal with it without case management, without any kind of resources, without any navigation, without any peer support. I personally believe that the bail system is gravely worse for North Dakota than any long-term prison sentence that we hand out.
You think that that's really the number one, what's
Yeah.
kind of biting us in the butt right now?
Well, I mean, if you think of it, like when I talk to the people, the jail administrators, we're sending one person, maybe two, to prison a month. We're releasing 300 a month from jail.
Really?
The average stay is 3 weeks. So if we're releasing 300 people that had to stay there for 3 weeks, we just forced, potentially, right? This isn't hypothetically. This is just kind of a potential forecast. We just made 300 people homeless
That's
based off
sick.
not being able to pay a cash bail, based off people who are never going to go to prison.
That's ridiculous, because it's often for a really low-level kind of, if you want to call them petty offenses, that a lot of these people end up in here for, right?
Yeah, petty offenses, or maybe they violated probation of some sort, but they didn't do enough to go to prison. My argument would be, if they didn't do enough to go to prison, they shouldn't be sitting in jail.
Exactly. And I really want to hit on this bail thing, because I think that really is the new frontier, right? Like, even in North Dakota, people are kind of sort of getting to the point where they're like, okay, we won't ruin your life over a plant. You guys win, which is awesome. And it's taken us way too long to get to that stupid half step, which started, and they wouldn't approve the damn medical marijuana in 2015 in the first place.
Yeah.
But going back to that, let's talk about some of the alternatives to that, because
Yeah.
I know that bail is one of those things that is so institutionalized that it's not even, it's oftentimes like one of the last things that people think of when it comes to the criminal justice system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you've seen, or that you guys have, or what do you think could replace what we have now with cash bail? I have a couple ideas, and I want to get your pick your brain on it.
So the extreme, Adam Martin, that's going to answer this question, would be there should be no replacement. We should just hand out court dates, and if they show up, they show up. If they don't, they go to jail.
Okay.
Right? I think, and if it's not for something that's going to potentially send them to prison, they shouldn't even go to jail for that. We should treat them as infractions.
Okay.
Fines, something like that.
If they're not a threat, if they're not
They're
hurting
not a
people.
threat. So the
Wow,
three,
don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. It's almost like a
Right.
lot of other stuff figures itself out.
Exactly. So non-violent, non-sexual,
Not victimless crimes.
right, victimless client. If somebody gets caught, obviously the big one on the agenda is marijuana, right? Is them possessing an ounce of marijuana hurting people in the community? Some people would make an argument that it's a gateway drug. Some people would make an argument that if they're doing that, they're probably doing other things. But it's a lot of hypotheticals that we haven't proven.
I would also like to point out, me and my wife did the count. There are about 24 bars and/or liquor stores in the 19-block radius of downtown Fargo. So that that doesn't seem like a gateway as much of a destination at
But
that
again,
point.
it's a threat to the structure, right?
Mhm.
So we have people that are in powerful places in North Dakota that partake in going to bars, or that partake in having home breweries, or partake in having alcohol in their homes.
Yep.
And if
They're
they
all for
start
freedom then.
right, exactly, and they will make sure that the people have those rights because they enjoy having those rights. We're trying. We say we. I'm
Very
not.
loosely.
Yeah, I'm there loosely. I don't do drugs or alcohol 100%. I don't even take pills. I don't do
Straight
nothing,
edge.
right? Yeah, exactly. Because that's what works for me. I am not against people enjoying their liberties, even though I don't participate in them. You know what I mean? I don't
Exactly.
drink, but the last thing that I'm going to do is force people not to drink. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
even an update that I put on Facebook today, it was, I enjoyed the last 7 New Year's sober. So if there's anyone out there struggling, let me know and I'll hang out with you tonight. But in the end of it, it's like, but for those who drink, have fun,
Yeah,
right?
and also be safe and
Be
responsible and
safe
all
and be
that
responsible.
stuff.
Don't make dumb decisions because you'll just be like another guy, another good person who became a felon who's living in my house.
Yep, exactly. And we have way, way too many of those. I'd also like to bring something up that I heard it at a event last year, an event or a system that's being tried to replace cash bail, which is where you take, instead of making people put money down, you make them give you like 2 or 3 phone numbers or a primary contact number where they can text some reminders on the day of, the day before, whatever. Here's your court date, here's your time, whatever. And that saw like 60% of people in that system showed up, which was a marked improvement from people that actually got out on cash bail in the first place, while also opening up. So like way fewer people obviously had to spend time in jail and lost their jobs and all that other stuff. Also, can I say how why is it that we always, in this state in particular, we always talk about these like massive labor shortages we have and all that great stuff? But I'm sure that you know quite a few people that at one point had jobs and were helping to alleviate that labor shortage before,
Yeah.
you know.
We have a ton of jobs available, but we also have a really bad stigma problem, right? You know, here, for instance, we are participating in Ban the Box, right? I'm a big fan of Ban the Box. I think that people should have the opportunity to interview before they reveal their data, right?
For those of you that don't know, Ban the Box is like they're trying to stop it. When you fill out a job application, it says check here if is it a felon or if you're have been
I think it's
convicted
just
of
a crime in general, but
It's one of
it
the
might
two.
be just be a felony.
Yeah, it's that, but they're trying to ban that so that, or at least make it something that's not on the initial form. I believe I think there's a couple different incarnations of it going around and ideas, but something to that effect where it would at least be like not an automatic screen and out.
Yeah, exactly.
Go on with what you're saying.
Well, here's an interesting tidbit about that. They're actually seeing an increase of racism with the ban of the box.
Really?
Right? Yeah. So let's say you take my friend Leonard, who works for me, right? African American male. His name is Leonard Wells, right? People may or may not know that that's kind of a black name, right? If you want to stereotype people. Adam Martin doesn't sound black, right? But Adam Martin's a felon. And so when you do background checks, it shows Leonard's not, which he is, but let's say he's not in this situation, shows that he's not, he's more likely to get that interview.
Okay, I
A
hear
person
what
who
you're
has to check the box will not get the interview. Well, now it's ban the box, right? Neither one of us have to put that we're felons. We both get the interview. I get the job.
I hear what
It's
you're saying.
showing racism with ban the box,
It's kind of a selection bias coming up, if you will.
where he actually had the one up on me because his background passed. Blow over to them that. Could potentially be a good candidate to work for, because that's the hardest thing is people want to do background checks because they want to know who's working for them, they want to know who's living with them. Well, if we're working with people that are currently trying to make their lives better, I think that that's a better avenue to hire and house people than someone who's just walking off the street.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And And the crazy thing about so many of these things, right, is that a lot of the reasons that people are locked up, or a lot of the what have you, is for things that are like so ridiculously petty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just kind of speaking off the cuff, how many people would you say that you know that got busted with, let's say, just low-level possession?
A good
That
chunk
ended
of
up in
them.
your, like, if
Yeah.
you had to put a loose plus or minus 5 to 10%
Well,
on it.
that's the problem, is it's subjective, right? So, like, what I think is a loosey kind of, low-level drug felony, people who've never been in that world don't feel that way. And so we keep saying that, but people are not identifying with what we're saying. So
That's
we
very
have to, this
interesting.
is why we've used F5 as a marketing a way to brand people and show them, like, yeah, they have a felony, but this is what they're doing today.
Okay.
Right? So instead of trying to get people to join us with what we think our idea of low-level felony is, we're trying to get them to join us to see what people are doing today that they can identify with.
I
They're
hear
getting
ya.
a job, they're getting a car, they're getting their kids back.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, now they look just like me instead of a guy that just has a felony.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, really kind of rehumanize them, if you will.
Exactly.
That's a very, very interesting approach. And so talking about things that have gone right, we've very briefly kind of glossed it over. What are some things that you've seen either in the community or kind of nationally, maybe even internationally, has really been beneficial? Because this isn't just like a Fargo, North Dakota problem. This isn't just an American problem. Victimless crimes are.
Yeah.
The studies have shown that people in urban, poor environments, particularly if you're in some type of politically unpopular minority, tend to get the brunt of these laws.
Yeah.
So it's really an international phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
So what have you seen that's kind of what gets us out, essentially?
Yeah. Criminal justice reform has been really interesting to watch over the last, especially, ever since I've been a felon, since I was 18 and I'm, 38 now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the last 20 years, but really in the last 3 years, it's been interesting watching Democrats and Republicans and even libertarians on their view with criminal justice reform. They're all the same, essentially. They just want to get there differently, right? Obviously, the libertarians want, like, for me, like, I would like to see personally a little bit of investment from the government for nonprofits or for-profit industries that have good practices. Dump money on them and let them do it, right? And less from the government, right? Because I think we do a better job than the government ever will.
That
right?
you do. I don't think that I've heard of anyone in the F5 project like caging people. So
Right.
you guys are
Not yet.
unless talk to us in another 20 years.
Yeah. I think as long as I'm around, you'll never see us act like a system. The Democrats, right, they are big on it seems like they're big on government spending and like more service providing from the government. And I could be completely wrong with that, but I am a big fan of the government spending money on stuff that works rather than just let's try this, let's try this, let's try that. Even though I'm a fan of that too, like let's find 5 different pilot programs, whatever works, let's continue to invest in that. And then the pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality with a little bit of investment. So it's like I see all 3 areas. Like you could be super Christian and still be criminal justice reform. You know what I mean? Like even, if you're talking to a Christian, it's be like your Jesus was legitimately the biggest reformer to your religion. So if you're against criminal justice reform, you're against everything that Jesus ever taught.
Yeah.
One
of his best friends was in fact a sex worker. Sex workers, folks, it's in the Bible. There's some other wild stuff too, but
I don't know if he condoned it.
He didn't condone it,
but he loved on her.
Yeah, he didn't. He didn't like stone her to death. He was very explicitly against that, I believe.
Yes.
If my 6 years of Christian schooling in elementary school are right, but I think that's something else that we're really missing in society. On this larger, I'm going to go off on one of my larger tangents here. is that we've become so like hyper polarized, right? Where it's almost about which team is doing it and who looks better rather than what's actually happening.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important that we get out there and kind of, I don't know, criminal justice reform seems like one of those things that everyone's already kind of in agreement upon, but we're just trying to score petty political points.
Yeah.
And I feel like the more open dialogue that we have about these issues, because we need to escape this, I call it the partisan death spiral. And we're seeing it in issues like criminal justice reform. We're seeing it in a ton of other things that we like to cover on here, the never-ending wars in the Middle East, the needlessly, increasing debt and deficit, spending money on programs that just aren't working, things like that. And it's all because the system has gotten hidden in over who is driving it at this point. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, the Democrats are impeaching the president, and although I don't think Nancy sent them over to the articles over to the Senate, which is interesting. But so we have the Democrats saying that the president is unfit for public office. Meanwhile, they hand him a reauthorization of the Patriot Act and $700 billion in military spending, an additional That's not something that you do to someone that isn't trustworthy. And that leads me to believe that we're just having all of the wrong conversations, it feels like. You know what I mean? Because even if what Trump did or didn't do, and I don't want to make it about that, I'm not trying to bring the F5 project into it, but folks, no matter what some of these people did, we've been ruining lives for 50 years in this country, the better part of a century now, over these nonviolent drug offenses. We've been killing people, we've been breaking apart families, we've been tearing up communities, and yet we don't find the time to talk about where we have the common ground to stop that. That seems very worrying to me. That seems like something bigger that we should try and communicate on, because like you said, we're all kind of on the same page. We're just looking at it from different ways. Yeah.
I think one thing that we want, so when I said earlier in the show was that if you'll never see us act like the system, right? Every organization, every service providing, every for-profit company, everything that I've ever seen, government agency, it's all about blanketing and trying to create as much impact as possible with little cost as possible, with the maximum amount of profit as possible, right? That doesn't work with human beings. It doesn't, right? And so if you look at the people that you serve and you see dollar bills, you've missed the boat, right? Because you cannot create an ROI on emotional stability. You cannot create an ROI on the power that a father has with a son. You cannot create an ROI on the power of the nurture that a mother can give their child, right? And when you rip families apart and you treat them like software and you treat them, automize them, or try to systemize them, this is the result that you're going to get. People are more... I announced that I was running for legislation, or as a legislator in my district 16 in West Fargo. Guess what question I got asked more than anything? What are you running as? Nobody cared about what I wanted to do with justice reform. Nobody cared about what I wanted to do for farmers. Nobody cared what I wanted to do with the legacy fund. They automatically assume that if you're running with a certain party in North Dakota, that you're going to run a certain way. Yep. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what I am.
Vote for the person.
Right. What matters to me is what I'm going to do, and who am I going to serve. The problem for me is that I was fearful. Like, I know what my role in North Dakota is. It's criminal justice reform. I don't know anything about it, that other stuff. And although I think I could have made the right decisions when I was approached with the right, bills or whatever, I don't think that we're in a position where someone can't focus 100% of their time on criminal justice reform just yet. We don't have any organization that does that. We have a bunch of little organizations that think they know.
Yeah, we have a bunch of people that are... it's really interesting watching the grassroots try and fill a lot of these gaps that are coming up.
It's cool. 3 years ago, it wasn't like this. It was me and one other organization that's been profitizing off it for a long time. Now it's seeing all these watching these shelters talk about justice reform. It's been super cool that it's became common language.
Yeah, not to mention we have 2 different bills to legalize marijuana.
Yeah.
We had a ballot initiative to expunge past records, and we brought that, that discussion was really out there.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think is so awesome is that we even got a very specific contingent of moderate Republicans in the state of North Dakota to come out and say, okay, well, they might not like legalizing it, but we'll stop with the Gestapo-esque tactics over a plant. You guys, damn, I never thought we'd get there even. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're doing it. Hell, we're decriminalizing magic mushrooms in some parts of this country.
Yeah. Well,
Think
I hope
about
you guys.
that. That's crazy.
The interesting argument is what would happen if we legalized everything.
Probably
That
see about
is-
20,000, 50,000 less people die a year from drug overdoses
I would say
immediately.
Yeah, it's an interesting tidbit because I'm 100%, clean, right? Like I don't use any drugs of any form at all, right? And so even with the people in the recovery community, they're like, you can't do that.
Here's where
But I think it's a form of jealousy, right? Because it's like you're going
They
to
can't do
legalize
that.
everything. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. They should have to go through. So now they're
Kind of
mimicking the same thing that the government has been doing,
yeah.
which gives a big brother kind of little brother mentality and a level of jealousy.
I will say real quick, although not the official policy, blah, 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 hell, at least if we legalized drugs, people would know what they were doing. I think that's something that gets lost in the discussion is like, can't we at least, and it's so crazy some of the things the government does, local police have taken after people that are selling just drug testing kits at entrances to raves where people know that everyone's doing drugs anyhow, but it's this weird, if you admit that you know, then you're in violation of this law, but if you pretend like you don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I think it'd be nice if people that, whoever, no one should do cocaine, it's a horrible, addictive life, blah, 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 we've seen all that, but sure it'd be nice if people could just do cocaine and not fentanyl. Christ, that'd be a start.
Or nothing.
Yeah,
Like
nothing. Like
nice.
Nothing would be the preferred, but
But see, there I go with my own agenda. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
When it comes
and
down to
everyone
is
has it.
everybody's agenda. It's like you're like, well, it'd be nice if people could just do cocaine instead of fentanyl, and I'm like, or nothing, right? Because that's
There's
what
a little
I
bit
do.
of bias.
Right, exactly. And it's like, when do we stop? Like my charge for 2020 for our people is to stop being professional and be more personal, right?
Interesting.
Like start shaking hands instead of like writing checks. Like what would it look like if the people that we serve, if we didn't have to have a paper trail for every single one of them? Why is that so important? Well, we need data. Bull crap. You need justification for your job,
Yep.
right? And
You
I
don't
don't
need data, you
care.
need connection.
Like I'm F5, the cause, like the impact that we're doing is always going to be around whether there's dollars associated with what we do or not, because it takes communities to turn things around, not governments.
Exactly. That is an excellent line. I can't wait to chop that up 80 million times. That was awesome. But we are just about out of time. I want to thank my guest one more time,
Thank you.
Mr. One more time on the organization and all that good stuff, contact information
Yeah.
for the good people.
If anybody just wants to contact us directly, it's info@f5project.org, and our website is f5project.org.
All right. Thank you again one more time, Adam Martin. That was an excellent interview. This is the Crazy Libertarian. Over and out. Don't touch that dial right yet. But thank you so much for listening while you there, folks. This has been the Crazy Libertarian on 88.1 FM. That is KPPP, triple PLP. I hope that you've really enjoyed the show, and I'm going to leave, as I'm sure you've gotten used to by this point, with my song of the day. And this one's kind of self-explanatory. I'll just listen to the words. You'll get it. It's Man in Black by Johnny Cash, and it's really not, it's the Man in Black singing Man in Black. There's a lot of Men in Black going on here, if you will. But I just really want to talk about the fact that, there's so much of this that we're forgetting, right? There's so many of these discussions and bureaucratic dictates and things coming out of D.C., but we don't talk about the people that it affects the most. And Johnny Cash always said that he wore black because there's a lot of people that get kind of faded into the background and their lives and stories matter. Well, folks, I think for all those 19-year-olds that are fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq, when they come back, maybe they should be able to have a cigarette or, I don't know, a beer. I'll let Johnny Cash intro that one, or exit that one out. I will say, however, that if that's the crazy libertarian position, then I have a good feeling that about 80% of my listeners, for the moment, are crazy libertarians themselves. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. Here is the Man in Black.